The Ohio Chamber of Commerce proudly brings you another episode of Down to Business, a podcast that elevates the voices of business, community, and thought leaders, aiming to empower you and your business. That's why we're here, to aggressively champion free enterprise, economic competitiveness, and growth for the benefit of all Ohioans. Now, without further ado, it's time to get down to business.
Welcome to Down to Business, the podcast where we dive deep into the heart of Ohio's business landscape. I'm Rick Carfagna, Senior Vice President for Government Affairs at the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be your guide through the stories, strategies, and successes that shape our state's vibrant economy. Whether you're an entrepreneur, business leader, or someone curious about the dynamic world of Ohio business, you're in the right place. Well, we've reached the halfway point in the 135th Ohio General Assembly. For those not familiar, each General Assembly is a 2-year period of legislative activity among the Ohio House of Representatives and the Ohio Senate. So during each General Assembly, the legislature passes the 2-year state operating budget in the first year, and then that's followed by a second year of legislating that's largely overshadowed by campaigning for the primary and the general elections. This past year, it's been a bit of an aberration in terms of legislative activity. On average, lawmakers pass an average of 52 bills per year, an odd number of years. In 2023, however, the legislature passed just 16 bills that were signed into law by the governor, and 4 of those were required budget bills. That makes 2023 the least productive lawmaking year in Ohio since at least 1955. That's not to say 2023 wasn't a productive year for the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and here to talk about several items of note in the past year and what we hope to accomplish during the remainder of this General Assembly is our Government Affairs team, and I've got 6 of them here today. Starting with Tony Long, our General Counsel. Welcome, Tony. Meredith Craig, our Director of Healthcare Policy. Justin Barnes, who directs not just federal affairs, but also oversees workforce, small business, and technology policy. Matt McLaren, who's our Director of Travel and Tourism Policy. Kevin Shimp, our former General Counsel, who is now an Associate Attorney with the law firm of Dickinson Wright. Kevin handles the realm of labor and legal policies. And then finally, our newest addition, Liz Baumgartner, who is our Director of Economic Development and Tax Policy. Welcome, everyone. Glad you're all with us. Tony, I'm going to start with you. You wear a lot of hats with the Ohio Chamber. You are our General Counsel. You also direct energy and environment policy for us. You also head up our housing task force. So there's lots to talk about on your end, and I'll just turn it over to you, Tony.
Thanks, Rick. So we were pleased to see that the DeWine-Husted administration took up the call that we've been talking about in our blueprint, and to anyone that will talk to us about the fact that we have a kind of a housing shortage here in Ohio. And part of their budget was a proposed low-income housing tax credit known as LIHTC. And over the next 4 years, that should allow 4,700 more units of housing to be built here in the state of Ohio. The Ohio Chamber has advocated for the House's more robust version, but believes the final version's a first start, and when coupled with the budget's other housing incentives, will start chipping away for this critical need in Ohio.
And that's a big problem, Tony, with workforce. I mean, We've got tens of thousands of jobs along the way, in the next 5 to 7 years coming from the mega projects alone that have been announced. And so we've got to have a place to put all these people. And then it's also a contributing factor to the escalating property values that are happening throughout the state. But
that's right, Rick. And it's not just here in Central Ohio. You think anytime they put in a major project, think Northwest Ohio up in Bowling Green, what kind of housing stock do you have when you try to attract that workforce? So some other initiatives of note, there was a single-family housing development tax credit proposed by the administration, the creation of an income tax deduction for home purchasing savings accounts, kind of a first-time home buyer's savings account, the Senate's Welcome Home Ohio program and appropriations, which will allow Ohioans to make needed renovations and updates to single-family homes, and then an increase in the signature threshold to place referendums on zoning on the ballot from 8% to 15%. This is important to our developer community who are trying to develop housing projects. You get through the whole gauntlet of things, and then someone decides they want to put something on the ballot, and then can slow the whole thing down or even stop it. So
lots in this state budget related to growing our housing supply, whether it's single-family homes, whether it's multifamily rentals. We know we need more housing across the full spectrum. It sounds like there are a lot of things that have been created. Really, now it's time to implement them, to track them, to see if they're being utilized by the developer community, and then, where are they taking advantage of them in terms of geographic locations throughout the state?
That's correct. And we'll continue to follow this, and we have a housing summit coming up next week, February 1st. So we will continue, obviously, to pound the table on why we need more housing for our workforce and for the citizens of Ohio. One other thing of note before I turn over the mic, we were able to finally work through the state mineral leasing of Tier 1 and Tier 2 properties, which is important in our blueprint. We think the exploration and mineral extraction of natural gas in the state of Ohio is important, given the huge quantity of natural gas that we have in this state. And for over the last decade, we haven't been able to move forward on the leasing of that to get it started. And through the General Assembly process and JCAR process, we finally have some rules in place to begin the exploration. There's some hiccups now, but we're going to continue to work on that, get that done, and get the mineral rights moving here in Ohio to add additional energy security for Ohio and the United States.
And that's important because we are sitting on the third largest reserves of oil and gas in the world in eastern Ohio in that shale play. And so I think not only harvesting those minerals, but then we have 4 refiners throughout the state too that can take those minerals and convert them into the gasoline that we use and that's needed to move not just people but freight throughout the state. So lots of potential in our energy resources. Tony, I'm glad that you're on top of that and that we're advocating for those public lands to be unleashed. And again, it doesn't involve any sort of surface impact to public lands. We're not talking about wholesale going in and clear cutting trees. Really, this can be done from adjacent properties to go in and take advantage of those minerals and do it in a very environmentally sensitive and responsible way. So I'm going to turn it over now to Meredith Craig. So Meredith handles healthcare policy for the Chamber of Commerce. Meredith, what do you have to talk about today?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So I want to touch briefly on another success, another victory in the state budget this past year. So one of the largest victories, I would argue, in the state budget was removing a benefit cliff for those disabled Ohioans 65 and older. The Medicaid buy-in for workers with disabilities program through the Department of Medicaid from the federal government allows individuals to work under the age of 65 and receive health benefits to do so. But that benefit was cut off at the age of 65. And so we were seeing those 65 and older being told they have to quit working, which is something obviously the Chamber was passionate about, wanted to step in and try and advocate for. And so thankfully with our hands on deck and everyone else, we were able to get this finalized through the budget in order for those disabled Ohioans 65 and older to continue working.
And there's lots of things that politically divide people. This was not one of them, thankfully. It was a bipartisan issue. We had some champions both on the Republican and Democratic sides of the aisle, and I want to acknowledge State Representative Jim Hoops, State Representative Mary Lightbody, and also Ranking Member Bride Rose Sweeney, who all really went to bat for us. We testified on this. We pushed it. We were the only organization pushing for this in the budget, so that was a really, really big victory, and kudos to you, Meredith.
Yep. No, thanks, Rick. So another big area of focus for the Chamber throughout this last year and will continue to be moving forward is just addressing behavioral health access and behavioral health provider, the workforce shortage in behavioral health. And so one of the bills that we are a strong advocate for and joining forces with the Northeast Ohio Medical University, NeoMed, is Senate Bill 60 and House Bill 97, two companion bills that would create a new certified mental health assistant program. So, like I said, we are facing a very strong and abrupt behavioral health workforce shortage here in the state. And on top of that, we are facing a mental health crisis across the board. And so this new licensure concept, again, developed by Neomed, would create what we would be known as a certified mental health assistant. It'd be a new practitioner, but would have limited prescriptive authority and not the ability to diagnose, but continue to treat those who happen to have depression, anxiety, those conditions where the supervising physician would be able to see them, diagnose them, treat, and then this certified mental health assistant can continue that moving forward in order to alleviate the long waiting list for psychiatrists that continue to struggle to take on new patients. So we think this is an innovative concept, obviously, that will help grow our behavioral health workforce, something that was an easy thing for us to sign on to and champion, and we look forward to continuing to engage with our strong partners in the Senate and the House in order to get this across the finish line.
Yeah, and it's really great to see innovative ideas like this bubble up from our public university system. You know, they're doing exactly what we want them to do, and that's to come up with some creative solutions to some of our societal problems in the Buckeye State. This is one of them. Really glad to get behind it. As you said, Meredith, we've got a crisis, not just in behavioral health, but also in addiction treatment. And, you know, it's something that unfortunately is going to get compounded as issue 2 continues to come to fruition here as well. The need is going to be strong. And so anything we can do to train more counselors, more of these certified mental health assistants to create that new type of licensure is really going to attack the problem.
Yeah, and it's certainly important for the business community to join in on this conversation. Medicaid provides more robust coverage than the commercial side. And so as the largest leading business advocate here in the state, it's important for us to advocate for our members in terms of access to behavioral health. So excited to keep working with our partners over across the street and looking forward to getting this done. So last thing I'll touch on before turning over the mic is another couple of companion bills that we're continuing to advocate for, and that's the authorization of remote dispensing pharmacies. This is House Bill 136 and Senate Bill 95. So again, trying to alleviate the burden of access, but in terms of pharmacy. So this would authorize the operation of remote dispensing pharmacies. The State Board of Pharmacy would regulate them. Again, no scope of practice concern. These would be monitored by a supervising pharmacist. These would be pharmacy interns, techs. They would be overseen and operated by both a supervising pharmacy and pharmacist using a telepharmacy system. Again, trying to capitalize in the rural areas, those that are underserved, to try and make sure everyone has equal access to their pharmacy benefits. So excited to continue to work with our partners again in the legislature to see if we can get this done.
Great updates, Meredith. Thank you for that. Well, next, I'd like to turn the mic over to Justin Barnes. And Justin wears a multitude of hats. He formerly directed our research foundation. Now he handles not just federal affairs, so he keeps tabs on what's happening in Washington, D.C., but he also oversees, again, workforce, small business, and technology policy. Justin, you've got a very long list of things that you are working on, things that we were able to get done this past year. Shed some light on it.
Thanks, Rick. As you mentioned, there are a few things that we were able to get done in the state budget. And some things that we continue to work on here at the Chamber. First and foremost, obviously the biggest change in the education and workforce space is the inclusion of Senate Bill 1 or House Bill 12 in the state operating budget. This is a restructure of the Ohio Department of Education. It is now known as the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, and a greater emphasis is now being placed in the K-12 space on preparing students to enter the workforce and have skills necessary to get a job if that's the route they decide they want to go. And so career readiness continues to be a focus of the administration, and we're thankful that the legislature and the DeWine Husted administration included that in the state operating budget. We feel it's very important to help address some of the workforce shortage and the challenges that Ohio is going to face in the years ahead. Similarly, in the K-12 space, there were some provisions in the budget that promote the offering of computer science education and STEM offerings at the K-12 level. This is, again, part of our blueprint recommendations, something that we have been very positive in promoting over the past year and a half. We know that computer science education in the state of Ohio is lacking compared to the needs of the information technology industry in Ohio. And we know that the State Committee on Computer Science made some recommendations that were included in the state budget to increase computer science offerings in the K-12 level, get kids exposed to the opportunities that are made available by the wealth of industry that's moved into Ohio over the last couple of years with data centers and technology, and really get them experience and exposure with computers and computer science education at an earlier time in their lives. One other thing that I'll mention in the state budget that we were very supportive of is a streamlining of Ohio's administrative code. The DeWine-Husted administration in January of last year held a press conference where they called on the legislature to work with them on streamlining Ohio's administrative code by reducing the size of the administrative code by about a third. At the time, and since then, progress has been made, but at the time, there were a lot of duplicative and unnecessary restrictions in Ohio's regulatory code, and we felt and continue to feel that it's important to reduce those regulatory burdens and barriers for businesses operating in every industry in the state of Ohio. So we're excited that provisions were included in the state budget to help move that toward a successful goal in the near future. A couple of bills we continue to work on here at the Chamber. One is Senate Bill 17, sponsored by Senator Steve Wilson. This bill would add concepts of free market capitalism to financial literacy requirements in the K-12 space. This is important, obviously, because as business owners across the state, you understand the importance of capitalism as you are setting out on your entrepreneurial path and growing and making your business successful. And it's important to keep future generations of students made aware of the benefits that capitalism as a system provides, not only for the state economy, but for our country overall as well. Another bill that we are proud to support is Senate Bill 98. This is introduced by Senator Mike Ruley. This bill would establish new identity theft protections for Ohio businesses. So this bill would create a process for businesses and individuals to report when a bad actor has formed a new business fraudulently using someone else's address or personal information, or someone who's taken over a legitimate business filing to leverage it for fraud. And really, this is attempts to crack down on misleading mailers that imitate official governmental entities and charging exorbitant amounts of money for public services that are typically provided free or at a very low cost. It reduces the ability of thieves to reinstate and exploit old businesses for illegal purposes. And it stops fraudulent businesses from using false address information or a P.O. box address or a commercial mailbox address to hide their identities. Really, this is about, again, providing protections, identity theft protections, not only for individuals, but for small businesses as well.
And it's sad that we have to pass a law to do these sorts of things, but criminals are getting more and more creative every day, and a lot of them, as you said, Justin, are taking advantage of perhaps dormant small businesses and entering into new businesses under their name and able to run up credit and do all sorts of nefarious things. So we're really hopeful that we'll get this one done here sometime this year.
Absolutely. Yep. Two other things I want to mention quickly. One is a new piece of legislation, House Bill 345, introduced by Representatives Thomas Hall and Bill Seitz. This would enact a balanced and comprehensive data privacy infrastructure in the state of Ohio. So really the purpose of the legislation is to equip Ohioans with consumer rights and recourse related to their personal data. Obviously, as we were just talking about, identity theft has been on the rise, and with the increase in e-commerce and the rise in internet connectivity for businesses and consumers alike, data privacy and protection is going to become critical for the state of Ohio. And absent a federal solution, which I really don't see on the horizon in the short term, it's important for the state to take steps to make these protections impactful for Ohioans and for Ohio businesses.
And really, it's about giving people ownership over the data that is being collected and stored on them. I mean, in voluminous amounts by businesses. Right. As you said, I mean, we're evolving more towards this virtual platform, but people are largely unaware that their data is being stored. It's being collected, it's being stored, it's being sold to third parties without their knowledge. So giving them some of those rights is really important. And then also giving a framework for businesses and how they're managing that data and making sure that if they're doing the right thing, that they've got those legal safeguards in place.
Yeah, the bill really does establish that framework and provide some of those liability protections for businesses that make an effort to protect that private information for individuals so that businesses understand the rules of the road and they have some guidelines that they can adhere to as to how that information should be handled. So very important issue and something we're hoping gets done. And an issue that is near and dear to my heart, obviously, as someone who works on workforce development, Work and Learn Ohio is an initiative that we are proposing to the legislature and to the administration. We really want to create a public-private partnership that would connect Ohio college students with Ohio-based employers to facilitate internships, externships, and co-ops. This is designed on a couple of models that exist in other states, Indiana and Washington and others. But really we want this to be a situation where if you're attending an Ohio college or university, we want to give you a work-based learning experience while you're in school, and hopefully that work-based learning experience will translate into a job offer after you graduate so that you have an opportunity to stay and work and raise your family and put down roots here in Ohio and not feel like you have to go other places to find that opportunity. There are tons of instances where individuals come into the state of Ohio to go to college or go to school, having been raised in Ohio, and leave and go to other states. Ohio is unfortunately a net loser in the quote-unquote brain drain game, but we're hoping that an initiative like Work and Learn Ohio will help address that. And briefly, I just want to mention some of the activity that happened in Washington over the last year. We saw for the first time in U.S. history the successful utilization of what's known as a motion to vacate. That is a process by which a member of Congress can put forward a parliamentary motion to remove the speaker from his position or her position as head of the U.S. House of Representatives. That was successfully accomplished in the middle of last year to remove Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the U.S. House. And so we went 7 or 8 rounds determining who was going to be the next speaker, and finally we settled on Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana. That largely stemmed from a fight over a spending agreement that Kevin McCarthy reached with leaders in the Senate and the White House early last year on budgets for federal agencies and departments. Conservative Republicans in the House were not happy with that agreement, and so decided to remove Mr. McCarthy from his position. A similar potential fight is brewing in the House right now. Speaker Johnson has his hands full trying to negotiate new spending packages with the Senate and the White House, with deadlines coming up in early March. Again, similarly to the Ohio House, the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate didn't get a ton of legislating done outside of the required funding bills, but we continue to see legislative activity on government funding and on a couple of other policy issues slowly creep forward, and we're hoping that stability is the name of the game for the business community when it comes to government funding and government agencies, and we're hoping that Congress realizes that a shutdown is not in anyone's best interest. So just briefly wanted to mention a little bit of the world of D.C. So.
Well, we certainly live in interesting times, but I'm glad to hear that at least at the state level, there's no shortage of ambitious ideas about how to move the needle on workforce and, a lot of these other measures. So great work, Justin. And next, I'd like to turn to Matt McLaren. Matt McLaren is our Director of Travel and Tourism Policy, and Matt actually joins us from the Ohio Department of Development, where he formerly headed up Tourism Ohio. So, the Ohio Chamber has been looking to extend its reach and get into other different policy areas. Amazingly, we have not done very much with travel and tourism throughout the state, despite how much money it brings into our economy. So we've got Matt on our team now to spearhead these types of areas, and then also to work on kind of the new ground of gaming and sports gaming in Ohio. So I'll turn it over to you, Matt. What do you got?
Yeah, thank you, Rick. I'm happy to say we're doing it now. Travel and tourism is a new area for the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and it fits. When you take a look at our blueprint for Ohio's economic future, both sense of place and workforce development are goals within that blueprint, and travel and tourism can help achieve both of those. Travel and tourism is a $53 billion industry in the state of Ohio, and it's growing. Through our support of it, we are helping our business members such as hotels, restaurants, lodging, attractions, events, transportation companies, and more. And this is a growing area of membership for the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. And I'm happy to say we're doing this alongside of many of the lodging, restaurant, travel associations that are in existence in the state of Ohio. It is a collective effort to support more marketing funding for Ohio and more tourism infrastructure spending in our state, because we need these things to help get people to want to visit, live, and work in Ohio. And we need more people visiting, living, and working in Ohio because our economy continues to grow while our population is stagnant. Recent studies show that we are on pace to have more jobs than people. But if we can get people to visit here, studies also show that that gets them to want to live and work in a state. In fact, a recent study in 2023 showed that 2/3 of movers visited their new hometown as a leisure traveler within a year prior to that move. Now, in addition to both supporting and promoting Ohio's travel and tourism industry, we are also protecting it. This last November, an amendment was added to a fast-moving bill. It was House Bill 101, and that amendment would have allowed lodging tax to be used for a jail. It would have been the first time that we'd have seen lodging tax diverted for use of a jail in the state of Ohio, and quite simply, that's the wrong type of heads and beds that we want to support. We were able to get involved. Lodging tax is meant to be used in ways that support tourism and attract guests that pay both that tax and other taxes during their visit. And through our involvement, we were able to remove that provision from the bill, thereby not only helping to support and promote the industry, but also protect Ohio's travel and tourism industry.
And that's part of the advocacy here at the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. I mean, certainly we want to be cheerleaders for, a variety of really good pro-business ideas, but we also have to be vigilant, and we have to look out for things that take us in the opposite direction. And unfortunately, this was something where you had to get involved. We're the Ohio Chamber, look, we certainly support reducing crime. We certainly support building new county jails, finding ways to do it. But by diverting that bed tax revenue that is derived off the backs of our hospitality industry and using it for a completely different purpose, it's just not appropriate.
That's exactly right. And I think this actually provided an opportunity to speak with many legislators and help educate them more about travel and tourism and what it actually provides to Ohio's economy. So very proud of the work we're able to do on that issue.
Well done, Matt.
Now, another area for me is running the Ohio Chamber Gaming Committee. This has been around for a little less than a year now, so also a new area for the Chamber. Ohio has 4 casinos and 7 racinos and sports betting. Now, the Gaming Committee is bringing attention to the community good that our gaming companies are contributing to Ohio. This includes paying over $112 million in taxes to the student fund each year, paying over $450 million a year to state education programs and taxes, and last year, in its first full year, sports betting generated over $115 million in taxes, which is also being used by Ohio schools.
It's incredible.
It's an incredible amount of money, and these companies are also donating dollars. Since gaming was legalized in the state of Ohio about 10 years ago, we've seen over $30 million donated by Ohio gaming companies to local groups. They really are. Ohio's gaming companies really are active community partners that create jobs in over half of Ohio's counties and pay taxes that support schools and students all across our state.
In sports gaming, Matt, I mean, it's still in its infancy, as you mentioned, but, it really it touches on so many different facets of our economy throughout different parts of the state. I mean, we have so many different professional sports teams in some of our larger urban areas, but we also have the NFL Hall of Fame in Canton, for example. And I mean, anytime we're talking about sports gaming, there's all of the spillover benefits that impact those sports teams, those areas of the state.
There really is, and that's what travel and tourism, that sense of place that helps bring recognition to places like the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, and the many great sports teams we have in all of the top cities across the state of Ohio. And at the end of the day, what we're seeing in gaming is an increased spend in the gaming area, and that means more tax dollars for Ohio schools.
It is. Well, great updates all across the board. Thank you, Matt. Next, I'd like to turn gears to Kevin Schimpf, who, again, covers the realm of labor and legal policies. Kevin has been with the Chamber for many years now, formerly served as our general counsel. He is now our external counsel. He is an associate attorney with the law firm of Dickinson Wright, but he still runs the gamut on labor issues, on workers' compensation issues, on unemployment compensation, and just, a whole variety of different labor and legal matters. So, Kevin, what do you have for us today?
Thanks for having me today, Rick. Excited to talk about a couple different pieces of legislation. And we'll start by talking about one of those 16 bills that has been enacted into law. And even more rare, it wasn't one of those 4 bills that was required by the law. So that is Senate Bill 21. It's legislation sponsored by Senators Rob McCauley and Senators Michelle Reynolds. And it really does 2 things that help our business community. It enables small businesses who are facing licensure issues or maybe an order from a state agency that they disagree with to make it easier for them to challenge that agency decision. And it also increases judicial efficiency in our state. It accomplishes both of these aims by changing how these types of appeals take place. Previously, prior to Senate Bill 21, a business owner was required to come to Franklin County and sue the state agency in their home, in their backyard, their home court, if you will. Senate Bill 21 gets away with that exclusive jurisdiction in Franklin County in most instances and allows the business owner to bring the action in their home county, in their home court of common pleas. We think this is beneficial to business owners because, it reduces the barrier to entry into the court system. But at the same time, it can increase our judicial efficiency because previously when you have all state appeals happening in one county, that's going to really balloon that county's docket and make it harder and I guess take longer for that business owner to get the resolution they're seeking. Now that Senate Bill 21 is in effect, the 88 different county courts get to hear these appeals. So we think the dockets will shrink and ultimately business owners will be able to get to the resolution quicker.
And do it nearby.
Exactly right. If you're in Ashtabula traveling 2.5 hours, might be a reason not to file that action.
Exactly.
This was an original top 10 bill of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. We testified on the bill throughout the process, including in the House Civil Justice Committee. The bill took effect in June of this year, the bill passed in June of this year and took effect at the end of September. So that's Senate Bill 21 in a nutshell. We were glad to see that get across the finish line, and we really thank Senators McCauley and Reynolds for their leadership in the process. Now we'll turn to a couple bills that I think we like to describe as tort reform 2.0, and we describe it as tort reform 2.0 because the original aspects of tort reform, Ohio was really, really successful in enacting those needed reforms that help Ohio's business community and our legal climate. If you look at the American Tort Reform Association scorecard of states that have enacted these tort reform 1.0 issues. This includes 10 different things like punitive damage reforms, non-economic damage caps, joint and several liability, the collateral source rule. These 10 reforms, Ohio is one of 2 states that has enacted each of those. Really that a lot of those reforms were accomplished in a bill that's near and dear to the Ohio Chamber, which is Senate Bill 80. Senate Bill 80 had a lot of positive aspects and brought a lot of positive reforms to the business community, and it was spearheaded by then State Senator Steve Stivers. And we are thankful now that he's leading the chamber and able to bring a really good voice on tort reform issues as an original leader in this area. So as we look to tort reform 2.0, as I'm calling it, we'll start with Senate Bill 63. Senate Bill 63 is asbestos overnaming. And this is asbestos lawsuits are particularly challenging because when you think of typical litigation, it's one party who was harmed by another party, maybe harmed by 1 or 2 parties, and there's a couple groups or people involved in this lawsuit, and it's easy to identify who should be a named party. Asbestos is not necessarily that way, and plaintiff attorneys have taken this shotgun lawsuit approach and are naming dozens, if not hundreds, of businesses in a individual lawsuit. And this is incredibly problematic because most of the time these businesses should never be named in that lawsuit in the first place. They somehow appeared in a public record. A plaintiff's attorney, performed a lack of due diligence and just added that party to the lawsuit without much thought. And once you're named in that lawsuit, it becomes expensive and hard for you to get out of that lawsuit. And so Senate Bill 63 seeks to address that issue. What it does is it requires a plaintiff to provide some basic information at the outset of the lawsuit to explain why they're naming this party in the lawsuit. Some of this information is literally as simple as the smoking history of the plaintiff, the current and past employers of the plaintiff, and the asbestos product that they are alleging caused the harm. So this
is making your case on the front end, really, rather than just casting this really large net where all these businesses are named, and then the businesses may not have anything to do with the case, but now they have to expend the time and the energy and the money to basically get themselves taken off of this long list.
You're right. We're not requiring them to prove the ultimate exposure at the outset, but we are asking for the plaintiffs to take an additional step to say, here is the factual and evidentiary basis for why this person should be in the lawsuit. And our goal is to shrink, a list of defendants from maybe a couple of dozen to a dozen. We understand asbestos litigation is unique. And that these plaintiffs are sometimes family members of decedents who don't have a bunch of information, but at the same time, we need to make sure we're balancing the interests of both parties in litigation. And frankly, Senate Bill 63 makes sure that we do accomplish that balance. The bill does not diminish the ultimate recovery of the plaintiff. So whatever the plaintiff would be able to collect from the true rightful parties that caused the harm prior to Senate Bill 63, they would still be able to do after Senate Bill 63. And additionally, if a party is improperly removed or if new information becomes available, that party can be added to the lawsuit after the fact. And so the plaintiff is always going to be able to recover their maximum award from the rightful party. Senate Bill 63 tries to get these businesses that have no reason to be in the lawsuit out of that lawsuit quicker. In talking to legislators, we've heard it called the Sue the Right Person Act. And I think that really kind of boils it down to exactly the essence of the bill. So Senate Bill 63 recently passed the Senate Insurance Committee. We are awaiting a floor vote in the Senate, and we look forward to continuing to talk to lawmakers about the importance of this bill.
Great. Thank you.
Quickly turn to Senate Bill 19, which is another part of our Tort Reform 2.0 package. And Senate Bill 19 seeks to address an issue called third-party litigation financing. It's a relatively unknown practice, but it boils down to essentially a plaintiff or a plaintiff's lawyer will seek money from a non-party in the lawsuit to help cover either expenses to bring the lawsuit or help cover everyday expenses that the plaintiff may be that the plaintiff may have during the lawsuit that they are hopefully trying to pay with whatever award is ultimately given to them. And so this third-party litigation financing is relatively new, but we continue to see it grow. And Senate Bill 19 seeks to bring some light to this practice because right now, these third-party financiers are secretive in the litigation. There is no disclosure requirement, which means if you are the defendant or another party in the lawsuit that hasn't taken a third-party litigation financing agreement, you have no idea it exists. And this is problematic because it makes settlement harder. It makes it harder for the parties to determine the value of a case. And we think that disclosure here brings parity to what we already have under Ohio law, which is automatic disclosure of insurance agreements. And insurance agreements help plaintiffs value the claims, and we know that a third-party litigation financing agreement will help other parties value the claim. And so we are really looking forward to working with Senator Wilson to get this bill out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. We just had a second hearing in December of last year, and we're working with our partners at the U.S. Chamber and the Ohio Alliance for Civil Justice on this legislation. Another bill I want to talk about is Senate Bill 96 and House Bill 273. These bills build upon successes that the legislature and the chamber advocated for last General Assembly to adopt to this work from home environment that we all know exists after the coronavirus pandemic. Last General Assembly, we successfully changed the definition of, or added a definition of what is a work from home injury for purposes of workers' compensation. We made changes to the Ohio's overtime laws as well to reflect the reality that more people are working from home. Senate Bill 96 and House Bill 273 build upon these successes by saying, hey, employers, that you have this requirement to put your employees on notice of certain employment laws like minimum wage, employment discrimination, prevailing wage. Right now, those posters must be placed in a conspicuous place at the place of employment, so a physical office location.
Usually like in the break room or, somewhere, in the locker room or, somewhere that all employees are going to be able to see it by the time cards.
Correct. Yes. They feel that is conspicuous, but now, past the COVID-19 pandemic, the most conspicuous place to post a poster might be online. And so Senate Bill 96, House Bill 273 allow employers to post these notices online. The Ohio Chamber key voted this legislation when it was coming out of the Senate. It did receive unanimous support, and we look forward to continue to supporting both bills as they're both currently pending in the House Commerce and Labor Committee. A couple other bills that are just on our radar right now that I want to talk about. First, starting with bills that we support. That's Senate Bill 106. Senate Bill 106 is a workers' compensation bill that recently had an amendment added to it that would make it easier for employers to gain access to the medical information of a claimant of one of their injured workers. Also talking about Senate Bill 116. Senate Bill 116 seeks to put Ohio's unemployment compensation system on a path towards solvency. The last time the state of Ohio met the United States Department of Labor's solvency target for unemployment was 1974. So it's been, nearly 50 years since that target has been reached. We think Senate Bill 116 can help us get us there. A bill that we oppose that we know is moving, or at least might be considered in this year, is House Bill 285. It's sponsored by Reps Haraz Gambari and Rep Rogers, and it would require one-size-fits-all, really restrictive nurse staffing ratios. We see this as unnecessary because hospitals already work with nurses under Ohio law to create nurse staffing plans that they submit to the Department of Health every 2 years. And in fact, we've seen California pass legislation similar to this. And as a result of the legislation, hospitals were, particularly in rural areas, were unable to meet these ratios, and they had to close down service lines. And in one instance, a hospital had to close their oncology department because they couldn't meet the nurse staffing ratios. So we're going to work with our friends at the hospitals to explain to the legislature why House Bill 285 is a misguided attempt to address some nursing issues. We're also watching House Bill 179 that just recently passed the House, move into the Senate, and see where that bill goes from here. And then finally, I know Rick and worked a lot on this issue, and I've taken kind of the lens of the employment law, talking about these issue 2 reform bills. We see House Bill 86 and House Bill 354. Yeah. House Bill 86 was what the Senate's approach was, and we see it in House Bill 354. And Rick, I don't know what you want to add.
No, sure. Well, so Ohio's initiated statute to legalize recreational marijuana. It officially took effect back on December the 7th. Although the state rules to authorize the sale of marijuana at dispensaries are going to take several months to roll out, the use and the possession of recreational marijuana in Ohio is now legal. We're not here to relitigate this. We opposed issue 2. It's passed. We're going to respect the will of the people, but we also want to be constructive about how this is rolled out. And so, we have offered testimony both in the House and the Senate. We've had conversations with the governor's office, and really it boils down to 3 key areas. The first being employer workplace protections. So we want to strengthen Ohio's employer protection laws to account for recreational marijuana usage. There was a lot of cutting and pasting of the existing medical marijuana statute over into this new area, but we think that it could be tightened up even further. But really, we need to reinforce that employers have the abilities to maintain drug-free workplaces, zero-tolerance policies, and the flexibility to conduct employee testing. We've also talked about ensuring private property rights. The Ohio Chamber, we think that this statute, it's ambiguous to what extent private property owners can prohibit people from using, possessing, displaying, or transferring marijuana on their properties, and that's apart from the existing bans on smoking. We also think that publicly accessible places such as shopping malls, restaurants and bars, amusement parks, other large areas that are under private ownership should be able to limit cannabis use and possession and beyond the state's existing smoking ban. And then finally, we've proposed amending the tax distribution. Governor DeWine, the Ohio Senate, the Ohio House, they proposed a multitude of different ideas on how best to distribute the new income stream derived from legalized recreational marijuana. We think at minimum there are two key areas that we should be funding through this new revenue stream, the first being law enforcement, and then really the other one being behavioral health and recovery services, as we had alluded to earlier. So, rather than to go through all of that again, and we could easily do a podcast about it, all I'll end it with is that we're going to continue our advocacy with the Wine administration, with the state legislature, to make sure Issue 2's rollout is safer and more socially responsible. And we'll continue to provide updates to our members as that process continues. We're hopeful that these Issue 2 fixes are finalized and signed into law so that we can provide some true guidance to the employer community that kind of right now is twisting in the wind. There's different ideas on how to, equip them again with some of those rights that we talked about earlier. But we won't know for certain until it's permanized. So again, something else to keep an eye on. And one more thing I know, Kevin, that is really important from a labor standpoint is House Bill 205. And that involves really, we believe, the forced unionization of employees on construction projects at Ohio's refineries. We had talked earlier with Tony Long about the importance of harvesting our energy resources, and refining goes hand in hand with that. And really what this bill does is you have the state government coming in and dictating not just what sort of workforce is going to work on these projects, who you are to hire to work on these projects, but also the ratios of these people that you are to hire. And so it's a bill that's been around now for two different General Assemblies. We are very keyed up against this bill. And really, apart from how it's going to, we think, be destructive to energy in the state, it really goes back to the principle of you have the state government telling any sort of private business, again, who you are to hire and at what ratios you're going to hire. So I don't frankly care if it's a refinery. I mean, I do care it's a refinery, but whether it's a refinery, whether it's Intel, whether it's Honda, whether it's, your local bakery or any sort of small business, it's just not appropriate for the government to be inserting itself into those hiring decisions. So that's a really good comprehensive update, Kevin. I appreciate you sharing it with us. Next, I am going to shift gears and go to our newcomer here with the Ohio Chamber of Commerce's Government Affairs team, and that's Liz Baumgartner. So Liz actually comes to us from the office of Ohio Senate Finance Chairman Matt Dolan, who is now a candidate for the United States Senate. But Liz is one of the more veteran staff members from the Ohio Senate, and we're really glad that she has joined us. She is going to be covering for us economic development and tax policy. So plenty for you to get your hands dirty on. But Liz, I know some of these issues you're going to talk about, you've been working on those from the legislature side of things. Now you're going to be working on them from the Ohio Chamber side of things. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a few issues that are of interest to this audience.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I am thrilled to be working with the Chamber. I'm happy to provide an overview of these provisions from the budget from the Chamber's perspective. So I'll jump right into the budget, which had many wins in the economic development and tax spheres. Very very notable provision is the extension of Jobs Ohio's liquor franchise for 15 years. So the Ohio Chamber both proposed and facilitated the amendment that was adopted. Although Jobs Ohio currently has 15 years remaining on its 25-year franchise, this extension will equip Jobs Ohio with increased capacity to compete for more economic opportunities now, longer-term agreements, and more aggressive incentives. So from here, the state and Jobs Ohio will enter into a formal extension agreement, which will then be approved by controlling board.
And Liz, that's really important because, right now the state of Ohio has the ability to negotiate tax incentives that run for, 30 years. But Jobs Ohio doesn't have a shelf life of that long. So it's really hard for them to come in and negotiate deals to lure companies in from out of state and from out of the country if they don't know if they're going to be around in 15 years. So really, it's about giving them a lot more bandwidth. They're going to have the liquor profits coming in that they can use as incentives. They can also borrow against those liquor profits. And as you said, it's just going to allow for more aggressive incentives and longer term agreements.
Exactly, yes. And so on the funding side of the budget, there were a number of economic development programs that were funded, some from the previous budget that had more funding for this next 2 fiscal years. So this included $350 million for brownfields, $150 million for demolition, $750 to prepare the infrastructure for economic development sites, as well as $125 million for innovation hubs. So on the tax side, the budget included major changes to the commercial activity tax, which took effect January 1st of this year. So at the request of Ohio Senate leaders, the Chamber was asked to weigh in on their proposal to cut the CAT. The Chamber suggested an approach that was ultimately adopted, a phased-in exemption of the CAT for taxable gross receipts of $3 million or less in fiscal year 24 and taxable gross receipts of $6 million or less in fiscal year 25. This will provide relief to all businesses paying the CAT, and once fully implemented, will eliminate the CAT for approximately 90% of all Ohio businesses, amounting to $698 million in total CAT relief over the biennium. Looking ahead to what we're watching this GA and working on, the Ohio Chamber is working in tandem with the Ohio Manufacturers Association and 2 members of the Ohio House to develop forthcoming legislation to create an Ohio Manufacturing Technologies Assistance Program. This is a grant program targeting small and medium-sized manufacturers that are otherwise lacking the capital and capability to modernize their machinery and facilities. So stay tuned for the bill introduction. I also wanted to mention that the Ohio Chamber Research Foundation has been working diligently on a tax study that will be released later this year. The study highlights taxes that are applicable to the majority of businesses in Ohio. It analyzes the impact of these taxes on businesses in the state, as well as the taxes themselves against selected peer locations on both the state and local level. So keep your eye out for the release of that study to come this year.
That's great, Liz. And I want to circle back real quick to the commercial activity tax exemptions. And again, our advocacy, it's not just limited to being a champion for certain ideas or being in opposition to other ideas, but sometimes we're asked to help shape ideas. And in this case, we did not necessarily propose a cut in the commercial activities tax. I mean, we get all kinds of tax cuts proposed to us, all different shapes and sizes, but the Ohio Senate came to the Ohio Chamber specifically and said, we intend to cut the CAT tax. What do you think is the most prudent way to go about it? We consulted with our own tax committee within our membership. We talked about it internally, and we came back with again, this approach. The Ohio Senate leaders came to us and said, this is something we want to do. How can we do it in the most responsible way? And we think that by doing this phase-in of $3 million or less in 24, $6 million or less in fiscal year 25, not only are we going to be helping more of the businesses on the smaller and medium-sized ones that are still looking to get a foothold and expand their operations, but it's also going to, I think, by and large, disproportionately help Ohio-based businesses, which is really important as we continue to grow our economy. So again, not necessarily something that we proposed, but we were asked in very short order to weigh in and provide some guidance. And we're grateful that Senate leaders actually took that to heart and shaped it in the way that they did. And as you said, Liz, it's going to eliminate the CAT tax for approximately 90% of all Ohio businesses. So any businesses that are paying the CAT are going to see some level of tax relief. So great point to make. I appreciate that. And as we've been talking throughout today's podcast, there's been a lot of mentions of the blueprint, and that's the blueprint for Ohio's economic future. And that's meant to really be kind of our 10-year visioning document for, where we think the state should be headed. We've got lots of great opportunities coming our way, lots of great economic wins that have happened, but, we've got a lot to prepare for, whether it's workforce, whether it's housing, whether it's childcare, whether it's transportation, just lots of areas that maybe we're falling a little bit short, but we have a window of opportunity to be addressing these. So I would encourage anyone listening to go to our website. You can pull up our blueprint for Ohio's economic future. We worked on it with Accenture. It's something that we intend to update probably every couple of years. But there's just a lot of really good fodder for, economic issues and ideas that are really going to provide opportunities for all Ohioans. I'd also, just a couple of quick hits before we close out. We also have a variety of events that we're going to be hosting throughout the year here at the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can always access them by going to our website and looking at events. We're also going to be having a post-primary Impact Ohio event. That'll be held on March 21st. That'll really be kind of a deep dive and an examination of the upcoming primaries. It'll be held the Thursday after the Tuesday election. So it'll be a great chance to just kind of hear from political experts about, what has happened, what can we expect going into the fall, what are some of the political ramifications of those wins and losses. And then we'll also be having what is known as a Women in Business event on March the 5th, where we will be convening all kinds of different membership companies from across the state to talk about, all of the strides that are being made by women in management roles and all of the great ideas that are coming up through their organizations. So our Women in Business event is a very well-attended event, and I would encourage you all to go online and purchase tickets if you've not already. So, but again, go to our website, go under events, and see all the great, all the diverse types of policy areas that we will be touching upon throughout the year. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we do a variety of site visits with our members. And that's, that involves getting our elected leaders out physically to see members' operations, see their offices, whatever widgets they're manufacturing, get them on the line to understand really not just what they're doing to help shape Ohio's economy, but also the opportunities that they're providing for their workers and for their communities. So that is something that we constantly are facilitating here at the Ohio Chamber. If you are a Chamber member and interested in putting together such a site visit, please let us know. Well, that wraps up another insightful episode of Down to Business. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe for more captivating conversations with key players and influencers in Ohio's business scene. Don't forget to leave us a review and share your thoughts. It helps us bring you the content that you want to hear. Until next time, stay informed, stay inspired, and let's keep Ohio's business community thriving. Thanks for being with us on Down to Business.